In the hard world of Hollywood, where careers are made by perception and ruined by gossip, a last sentence can be rendered. In this environment, a sentence can be delivered down before a court ever gets to strike a gavel. That's why Hollywood is a land of little forgiveness. Clifton Powell, a man whose visage is seared into the mind of a generation of moviegoers, was given his punishment in the court of popular opinion, not a courtroom. This is because the verdict was delivered by the court of public opinion. It struck shockwaves across the business as the notification of a final verdict in his protracted and hard legal dispute was announced. The information that was given created the idea that his career, with over 100 films and decades of great performances, had come to an end. Powell had made himself one of the most versatile and reliable character actors of his period during his career. His work had taken him from the rough streets of Southeast Washington, D.C., to the glitzy premieres of box office hits such as Ray and Rush Hour. His career had gone in all directions, but beneath the veneer of success, something was developing. A tempest of personal troubles, discrimination in the profession, and a startling charge that threatened to wreck everything he had ever accomplished. All that he had ever gained was threatened with destruction. But the real tale is based on the sentence passed many years ago, a conviction that cannot be appealed since there is no possibility to appeal. With the last formal verdict being given, the punishment will be determined by the realities of the circumstance. This is the story of how a guy can be legally exonerated yet still be professionally punished, and how the shadow of a single allegation can be more than enough to make a life sentence all by itself. Clifton Powell's adventure began in the crucible of Southeast Washington, D.C., a place where someone could burn to a cinder or be swallowed whole. This area was in a rural place, far away from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. He was born in poverty, and this was the background of the deep sense of loss that was to characterize his life from a tiny boy. His mother died when he was just 4 years old, and it was a tragic event that broke the security of his childhood. His mother died when he was only 4 years of age. His father was struggling with his own issues and a significant battle with alcoholism, and could not provide the constant supervision and assistance that a young child sorely required. This little child needed both badly. His father was the one left in care of him. Powell's childhood was a masterclass in survival, growing up in a society where poverty was everywhere, and the draw of street life was a constant, perilous temptation. Powell has learned how to survive throughout the years. Powell's life was a unique case study in survival. Many of his contemporaries never escaped the vicious cycle of crime and prison, and their creativity was snuffed out before it even had a chance to blossom. Powell fought a daily battle to avoid that fate, with a small but critical network of mentors and family members who saw a spark in him and battled to keep it alive. Powell's was a fight that he fought with tenacity and commitment. Powell's struggle was a battle that he waged with the support of loved ones and friends. His upbringing gave him both a certain resilience and a tremendous awareness of the human condition, both of which would later come to characterize his power as an actor. He had a knack for reading the subtle currents of desperation, optimism, and aspiration flowing through his neighborhood. He could see these currents, hear these currents, know these currents. He became part of the community at some point in time. He did not run away from the road that his environment had preordained for him. He used the raw energy of his environment and directed it into a craft to avoid the preordained path that his environment had preordained for him. Through playing, he was able to not only understand the complexities of his own life, but also to study the lives of other people. In the end, acting was his haven and his salvation. It was the self-discipline and resolve he needed to liberate himself from his environment that formed the basis of his professional ethics. It was on this ground that he was impelled to follow a dream so far removed from the world with which he was familiar as to seem inconceivable. His steady climb in Hollywood was not a flash-in-the-pan rise, but a sustained ascendancy built on talent, versatility, and a certain screen presence. This provided the groundwork for his gradual ascent in Hollywood. His big break came in 1993 when the classic Menace II Society was released, a film that was directed by the Hughes brothers. The movie was directed by John Hughes, and Powell's performance was a jolt of actual realism in this unvarnished portrayal of the difficulties that people encounter in urban places. The critics and casting directors were able to recognize an actor with the ability to convey great depth even in the most challenging roles, and this performance held their attention. He was not an actor performing a part. He was a conduit for a reality that a large segment of the mainstream American society had never experienced in such vivid terms. He was in a role he had never had before. Thanks to his role in the popular Friday series, Powell became a familiar face, if not a familiar name, rather fast. Since he was in the series, he was funny and charismatic and portrayed Pinky, the flamboyant and comically untrustworthy owner of a record store. The audience that saw the act took him to their hearts instantly. No other actor could swap styles of acting like he could, effortlessly. At one time, he may be the threatening foe whose look will chill you to the bone, and at another, he may be the comic relief whose delivery will have audiences rolling with laughter. That's when it was obvious this range was his primary selling component. When the job demanded more than a certain performance, Hollywood called him. It required a presence that would be remembered forever. Besides his work in a number of critically and economically successful movies, including Dead Presidents, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, and the critically acclaimed comedy Rush Hour, he also participated in several other movies that made a lasting impression on the public. In 2004, Powell had reached a new plateau in his career, thanks to the character he played in the critically acclaimed biopic, Ray. Powell portrayed Jeff Brown, the dedicated yet troubled road manager of the iconic singer, against Jamie Foxx's Oscar-winning portrayal as Ray Charles. Foxx took home the award for his acting. The actor's performance was a marvel of subtleties and quiet fortitude, and won him a hefty nomination for an NAACP Image Award. This nomination is a consequence of his performance. The recognition was more than a pat on the back. It was validation of his artistry, cementing him as one of the performance industry's most recognized performers. Clifton Powell has become a major figure in the American movie industry, with over 100 film and television credits to his name. This was confirmed by the fact that he had done it. It was a tribute to his tireless devotion to his art and his singular capacity to become any character assigned to him. The very industry that had applauded his talents was also an industry that erected invisible walls. And the personal life he'd worked so hard to create was beginning to show signs of strain. But for all of his professional achievements, the industry that praised his talents was also one that erected invisible barriers. Long before he faced a legal dilemma that jeopardized his livelihood, Clifton Powell was fighting the systemic prejudices of the entertainment industry. The battle he was fighting was more devious and secret than the one he himself was waging. There was a kind of bias in the sector, called colorism, that was rampant. It was a prejudice that judged actors not by the quality of their performance, but by the color of their skin. He stated his opinion regarding this discrimination in a bold and forthright approach. He recounted being turned down for numerous parts, often for the brutally honest and painful reason that he was too dark, or, in one especially humiliating occasion, may scare viewers because of his skin color. "My complexion could scare viewers," he said. These repeating realities were not separate events, but a chronic reality that shaped the trajectory of his professional life. He is an established performer. He was not able to fully shield himself from the prejudice that was deeply embedded in the very structure of the profession. Even if he was widely praised by critics, financially successful, and had a great deal of knowledge, such an attitude created a duality that is interesting and perplexing at the same time. Powell was lauded for creating characters who were real, scary, and multidimensional. This talent brought him many laurels. The roles that were played out in these circumstances added to the preconceptions that come with males with darker skin tones. His strong personality played in his favor when he was cast as a hustler or a whore. Suddenly, his skin tone became an issue when it came to jobs that demanded a particular sort of vulnerability. A romantic lead, a loving father figure, or a role that was crafted to elicit pity in a wide audience. Unfortunately, it was in the midst of being cast for roles that demanded a different type of sensitivity. Because of this unwritten rule of casting, his chances were limited. He was limited to certain sorts, and he never had the opportunity to show his full dramatic range in his career. So his chances were few. It impeded his growth as an artist, and helped to create the very preconceptions that would later make him an easy target when his character was attacked by the public. This was a double standard. It was a double standard. Powell's feelings of animosity were not limited to the conditions of his own personal situation. He saw a pernicious trend inside the black entertainment industry itself, where public criticism of peers often fed into the hands of a mainstream press all too willing to denigrate black singers. He saw this pattern from within the black entertainment world. He knew the pattern. Powell made a noteworthy statement in the immediate aftermath of the release of what he felt were overly harsh public comments made by filmmaker Spike Lee about another black actor. Powell's remarks was made as a question of principle, not a question of the person. This was not an act of silencing criticism. It was an act of calling for solidarity. He said he would not appreciate anybody who would go to crossover press and put down a fellow black entertainer. He made this declaration. In an industry where opportunities were already scarce and competition was militarized to keep individuals apart, Powell claimed that unity was a form of resistance that could be utilized to prevent more separation. This particular line of work was already limited in the quantity of openings. His point was that tearing each other down was pointless unless it was to bolster the structural barriers they were all battling against. This, he added, was the real purpose of their activities. Considering all of this, there was no doubt that the moment he was recognized with a nomination for an NAACP Image Award for his work on Ray was significant. Very exceptional circumstances were such that the recognized organizations of the business were eager to embrace his effort without reservation. He wasn't only giving us one of the most acclaimed portrayals of the film industry of the decade. His Jeff Brown was a complex, very human performance. It was a performance that measured up to one of the most celebrated depictions of the decade. The nomination was something that said to him that his brilliance could not be dismissed or devalued because of the color of his skin. That was an essential remark to make. It was something that showed this stance. In the course of a career that was sometimes marked by the effort to be seen as who he was and not how he appeared, this moment of momentary attention was a brilliant example of recognition. Still, the undercurrent of discrimination was always there, a systematic bias hidden behind the language of marketability and target demographics. It was a reminder that for actors like him, the fight for a part was often a fight to be considered in the first place. Powell, meanwhile, was not only traversing the professional minefields of Hollywood, but also experiencing seismic shifts in his personal life. Powell was trying to stay on top of it all. For him, finding the stability he had been yearning for ever since his turbulent upbringing turned out to be just as challenging to obtain in adulthood as it had been in his childhood. He married Kimberly Powell, and they started a family, providing the impression that they were living a steady and successful life. He was married to Kimberly Powell, but the incessant stresses of his professional life began to eat away the roots of their relationship in time. The continual travel, the hard hours of being on set, the high expectations of being a star, all add to a growing imbalance between them. The marriage finally broke apart, and they eventually divorced, a process that was not only emotionally devastating, but also financially catastrophic. Powell lost a startling $5 million in the settlement, a fortune that he had spent decades building up. Powell said that he lost this fortune due to the settlement. This shock robbed him of his financial security and made him start all over again, at an age when many people are looking forward to a retirement free from stress and anxiety. Eventually, Powell looked back on his own part in the breakup of his family, frankly and openly. He said he was not in his children's lives as a parent in his admittance. He was the sort of father so busy climbing the corporate ladder that he forgot to be there for his kids and the things they cared about most. He was a man so engrossed in his profession, he was able to materially provide for his children, but it did not take long to learn that money cannot replace for time, guidance, and emotional connection. But he made a regretful statement when he said, "I wasn't there for my children like I should have been." He estimated that the time away from home, which was 70% of the time, was simply too much time and too high of a price to pay for any success in the professional world. He believed this to be so. However deep it was, when he finally came to know himself, it was too late to save his marriage, or to undo the years of estrangement from his children. Then, it was too late. After his marriage broke up, Powell was more susceptible to the temptations that so often go with stardom and personal grief. He said he lost between $30,000 and $50,000 annually throughout the time he was gambling at casinos. That was after he developed a serious gambling addiction. Though it may have begun as a distraction, it quickly evolved into a harmful cycle, further depleting his financial resources and exacerbating his instability. There was also a group of people surrounding him, which he called fake friends. These people cared more about his fortune and celebrity than they did about him as a person. He was often surrounded by others, but his pattern of expensive spending transitory relationships, and bogus praise created a deep sense of imbalance within him. He remained emotionally vulnerable and alone, even though people continually around him. He was a man who in his private life was dealing with a major loss, financial hardship, and the consequences of his own behavior. He was also facing the consequences of his own actions. In his private life, he seemed like a man wrestling with these things, even if he seemed powerful and in charge on television. This inner fragility was hidden behind a mask of achievement and left him in a vulnerable position as the most critical crisis of his life was ready to break out. This put him in a very dangerous position. The latter part of the summer of 2011 was when Clifton Powell's carefully constructed world was shattered. The allegations she made against him were explosive, and they came from a lady known as Keontae Myers. She accused him of these things. A consensual encounter in a hotel room had turned forceful. Myers, a cocktail waitress at Harrah's Casino in New Orleans, said. Myers was alluding to the fight in the hotel room. She said he didn't stop when she asked him to. The media wasted little time in focusing their attention on the story under inquiry after the complaint was submitted. The claim was picked up by other tabloid publications, like TMZ, who soon began to churn out sensational headlines that put the actor in a poor light. In the blink of an eye, Powell's public image, the one he had projected to the world, changed dramatically. Someone who made people laugh in the movie Friday and moved people in the movie Ray was now related to one of the most terrible accusations that a person can be accused of. From the very beginning, Powell has consistently refused to acknowledge the charges. He made a strong declaration through the representatives he had appointed of his innocence and pledged to defend the claims with all the legal measures at his disposal. But in this age of the digital record, the charge itself is often the sole thing that dictates the outcome. This is the truth that should have put an end to the problem. The first criminal investigation was promptly discontinued for lack of proof. That crisis was ended there and then. But the headlines had already done their work. Following that, Myers filed a civil suit in which he requested damages in the amount of over $75,000. This legal tactic guaranteed that Powell's name would be associated with the dispute for many years to come, even if criminal charges were ever brought against him. He was therefore obliged to engage in a long and open controversy to defend his reputation. The legal litigation ended up being the most severe fight he's ever had in his whole life. The standard of proof in a civil lawsuit is called the preponderance of the evidence, which is a somewhat lower bar that asks merely what is more likely to be true. This is in contrast to a criminal trial, where the prosecution must prove that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The bar for a civil lawsuit is far lower. When it comes to navigating this terrain, a celebrity is exposed to a considerable level of risk. Just the fact that the case exists puts a cloud of suspicion over a career that can be fatal. Whether the lawsuit is justified or not, this is the case. Powell knew this profoundly. The legal process was arduous enough, but the true torment was in the gradual loss of trust. The dawning recognition that, in the court of public opinion, he had already been tried and found guilty. This was the root of the real anguish. The Hollywood industry, which is notorious for its emphasis on image and its sensitivity to risk, moved quickly. Gradually, over time, his capacity to accomplish the work, which he had been able to do in the past, lessened. Producers were reluctant to use it. Producers were frightened to use that name because it was a name associated with controversy. Powell remembers a TV show where he was supposed to be part of a story that would stretch across many episodes. His character was, however, written off after the second episode with no explanation. Powell was disappointed as he was looking forward to his appearance. The proof was not the problem that was of concern. It was pretty evident that the assertion that was being made there. The financial losses were huge, but the emotional toll it took is impossible to measure. When asked to choose the hardest time in his life, Powell said it was second only to the day his father died. He was shaken to the core by the gravity of the charges, and he wrestled with the idea that his own children might view him through the warped lens of the story being presented in the media. He was a father himself, and the charges hit him from the depths of his being. He witnessed the perplexity in the eyes of strangers and read the scathing words posted by anonymous individuals on the internet who had appointed themselves judge, jury, and executioner. He saw the restlessness of these people. For 4 long years, from 2011 to 2017, Powell lived with the effects of the case. This was the period from 2011 and 2017. With the court system moving forward, it was hard to keep his sanity and his job together. He fought to keep sane. Ultimately, in the year 2017, the civil action was rejected on the basis that there was not enough evidence to support the specific case. The whole court drama ended in a formal and unceremonious way, also with the dismissal of his own counterclaims for defamation after a year had passed. He was not charged with anything. He was not found liable for any damages, nor was he found guilty of any crime. That's what the investigation found. At first glance, it looked like a good result, but it was only a pretended triumph. This is where the real meaning of what Clifton Powell intended by that final sentence comes in. Even though he had been cleared by the courts, Hollywood and a large segment of the general public did not share this assessment. The time he spent litigating the lawsuit was time he would never get back. Never get those years back. His career was at a crucial point when it was interrupted by an allegation which had not been proved. When all was said and done, he was left with the startling and heartbreaking realization that perception is more powerful than reality in the current world. He felt sweet and bitter. This had become the punishment. The accusation itself had become the penalty. It was a sentence which meant he lost his reputation, lost his opportunities, and would forever carry a lifetime scar on his legacy, despite never having been found guilty of the crime for which he had been sent down. Even if the legal struggle had been won, the verdict handed down by the court of public opinion felt, in every important aspect, like a sentence that would continue for the rest of one's life.